father's last gift. I never imagined that losing my son would be the second worst thing to happen to me that week. Part 1, The Eviction. Carlton had been gone exactly 7 days when Cleo found me in the living room, folding his old shirts. The funeral flowers still filled the house with their cloying sweetness, a bitter contrast to the faint trace of his cologne clinging to every fabric. I sat curled in his favorite armchair, the one he'd insisted on keeping despite its clash with Cleo's modern taste, my tears landing silently on the soft wool. "Jack, we need to talk." Her voice cut through the quiet like shattered glass. I looked up, bracing for a conversation about the children or burial arrangements. Instead, Cleo stood in the doorway, wearing designer jeans and a blouse that probably cost more than my monthly social security check. Her manicured nails tapped the door frame as she spoke. "With Carlton gone," she began, her tone colder than the winter wind, "things need to change. The kids and I need space to grieve properly. And, honestly, having you here is just too much." My heart lurched. "This is my home too," I managed. "Carlton and I decided I'd stay to help with Emma and James." Cleo let out a humorless laugh. "He said a lot of things when he was medicated. This house belongs to me now. Pack your things, by tomorrow evening. And don't make a scene in front of the children." I stared down at the gray cardigan in my hands, the one he wore every Sunday reading the paper. "Where am I supposed to go?" "Learn to survive," she said, shrugging. "You'll figure something out." Then she turned on her heel and left me alone with the scent of loss and the dread of what came next. That night, I unpacked the suitcase I'd brought 5 years ago when Carlton insisted I sell my little apartment and move in. I left a note on Emma and James's bathroom mirror. "Grandma Jack had to move to a new place, but I love you both more than anything. Be good for Mommy. Love always." I didn't have the heart to say I wasn't sure where that new place would be. For 2 weeks, I lived in my car. I parked behind a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town, far enough from Carlton's neighborhood that I wouldn't risk running into anyone I knew, close enough that I could still drive past my grandchildren's school to catch a glimpse of them at recess. Each morning at 6 a.m., I washed my face in the diner restroom, ordered a coffee and toast, and tried to stretch $3 into survival. I slept curled in the driver's seat, the engine off, listening to nightly security guards' flashlights sweep past my windows. The worst part wasn't the cold or the ache in my bones from sleeping upright. It was the invisibility. My neighbor Margaret passed me in the grocery store and didn't recognize me. Her eyes slid right past the man who'd once brought her homemade cookies every Christmas. I'd become a ghost, part of the landscape, a problem to be ignored. Then, on the 15th day, my phone rang. I wiped the condensation from the screen and saw an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Peterson," said a measured voice. "This is Robert Chen from Chen Martinez and Associates. We need to discuss some urgent matters regarding your son's estate." My chest tightened. Lawyers on the phone usually spelled trouble, bills, insurance disputes, costs I couldn't begin to cover. But something in his tone kept me from hanging up. "Yes," I whispered. I can come in today." I hung up and pressed my head against the steering wheel, the first real tremor of hope I'd felt in 2 weeks. The conversation that followed would change everything. Part 2, The Lawyer's Office. The morning light felt oddly hopeful as I drove downtown, my worn coat buttoned tight against the spring chill. My car, a battered sedan that had become both my refuge and prison, hummed along 5th Street. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Cleo's disdainful face instead of my own determined one. I parked outside the Morrison building and climbed the marble steps, each echoing footstep reminding me how far I'd fallen, and how far I was about to rise. In the lobby, a polished receptionist nodded at me as if she'd been expecting this bedraggled man. I followed the directions to Suite 1203 and paused once before the door, smoothing my hair and clutching the strap of my threadbare satchel. "Mr. Peterson?" A warm voice greeted me as I entered a spacious office. Robert Chen stood behind a mahogany desk stacked with legal folders. The afternoon sun slanted through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating certificates on the wall and a leather couch to my left. "Please, have a seat," he said, gesturing toward a plush armchair. He poured coffee into a fine china cup and slid it across to me. The steam curled upward in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. "Thank you," I breathed, wrapping my hands around the warmth. "First, tell me how you're doing," Robert said, settling into his own chair. His calm eyes betrayed genuine concern rather than the clinical detachment I expected from a lawyer. I hesitated, then exhaled. "I've been living in my car," I admitted. The words tasted bitter on my tongue but hung between us like a confession. He nodded, making a note. "I thought you might be facing difficulties." Carlton anticipated this. He tapped the thick manila folder before him. "Let me read you the relevant clause." I braced myself, though I sensed this was what I'd been waiting for. "In trust for my father, Jack Peterson, I leave the sum of $7 million, to be managed by Chen Martinez and Associates until he can establish stable housing and financial management." His words reverberated in the quiet room. $7 million. I stared at him, heart pounding. $7 million, I echoed, my voice trembling. "He did this, for me?" Robert offered a gentle nod. "Your son was a savvy investor. But there's more." He flipped to another page. In the event that my wife, Cleo Peterson, attempts to remove my father from the family home or cut off contact between him and my children, full custody of Emma and James shall immediately transfer to my father, with all necessary financial support included. My chest tightened as the reality sank in. He'd built a fortress around me, around his children, long before I found myself at their mercy. Custody? I whispered. He reached into his desk and produced a small digital recorder. Carlton documented conversations with Cleo during his final months. Conversations in which she discussed sending you away and possibly relocating the children to California. He tapped play. A familiar voice filled the room, Cleo's, cold and clinical. Your mother is lovely, but she's not my responsibility. The kids need space to heal, and honestly, she'll figure something out. I looked away, unable to bear her dismissive tone. Robert clicked it off and slid the recorder across to me. There's one final thing, he said, unfolding a single sheet of paper. A letter from Carlton to you. My hands shook as I took the paper. The ink was smudged in places, as if his tears had fallen on it too. I cleared my throat, and Robert began to read. Dad, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to explain in person. I've seen how much you've given up to help me, how you cared for Emma and James like they were your own. I'm so sorry for the pain you'll feel when I'm gone, but I needed to protect you, and them, from what I've seen coming. I love you more than I can say. Use this gift to keep our family safe. You earned it. Love, Carlton. Tears blurred my vision. It wasn't just money, it was trust, love, and the final proof that I mattered to him. Robert stood, extending a hand. We'll get you out of that car today. First, a hotel suite, then, permanent housing. We'll file the custody paperwork this afternoon. I rose unsteadily and shook his hand. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt solid ground beneath me. As we walked toward the elevator, I paused to take one more look at the office, not as a place of wealth and power, but as the gateway to my son's last gift of protection. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I ignored it. Nothing else mattered now. Stepping into the elevator, I felt something shift inside me. The doors slid shut on the memory of the car behind the diner. When they opened again, I would step into my son's design, a life secured for his children and myself. A life he'd built in his last months, not for himself, but for us. And though the fight ahead, to claim custody, to rebuild my life, would be hard, I knew I would never face it alone. Because Carlton had made sure I never would. Part 3, The Homecoming. The polished tiles of Carlton's house gleamed in the late afternoon sun as I stepped onto the front stoop, not as a grieving father-in-law asking permission, but as the legal guardian of Emma and James. Beside me stood Robert Chen, his briefcase in hand, to our right, a social worker with a clipboard, behind us, Officer Martinez in crisp uniform. My heart pounded, but I squared my shoulders. Cleo answered the door wearing a puzzled frown. At first she didn't recognize me, until Robert cleared his throat and produced the court orders. Her eyes widened, color draining from her cheeks. Jack, what are you doing here? She stammered. Robert spoke calmly. Mrs. Peterson, pursuant to the will of Carlton Peterson, we are here to effect an immediate transfer of custody for Emma and James to Mr. Peterson. He held up the sealed documents. This is legally binding. Cleo's voice quavered. This isn't real. You can't take my children. The social worker stepped forward. Mrs. Peterson, the children will be dismissed from school at 3:15. We will meet you there to reunite them with their guardian. Her tone left no room for argument. Cleo's shoulders slumped, tears gathering in her eyes. She looked at me as if seeking sympathy, but I only offered a small, steady nod. Inside, the house was transformed, every trace of Carlton's warmth erased, the family photos replaced with minimalist art, the children's toys gone. I felt a pang of sorrow for what had been lost, but also a fierce resolve to protect what remained. An hour later, I stood outside the elementary school as students poured out into the yard. Emma emerged first, clutching her backpack straps, eyes wide with confusion. Grandpa Jack, she whispered, her voice catching. Behind her walked James, attempting a confident stride but glancing back at Cleo's car as if tethered by doubt. I knelt on one knee, arms open. Emma, James, I'm here for you. Emma hesitated only a heartbeat before running into my embrace. James followed, wrapping his arms around my waist. Cleo pulled up beside us, her face streaked with tears. The social worker guided the children to my side and reminded them gently, you are safe, and this home is yours now. In that moment, time blurred. The crowd of parents, the clatter of lockers, the buzzing of cell phones, it all faded. I saw only their faces, Emma's tearful relief, James's guarded triumph. Carlton had entrusted me with their care, and I would honor that promise. We moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment that evening, furnished by Robert's office until permanent housing was arranged. The children explored every corner. Emma discovered a soft armchair perfect for reading. James eyed the small yard outside, already plotting baseball drills. I unpacked their luggage while they sorted through salvaged toys and photos of their father. Later, as we sat on the threadbare couch eating pizza boxes on the floor, pepperoni for them, plain cheese for me, I told stories of Carlton's childhood, the time he tried to build a treehouse in our backyard, only to need Grandpa's help to finish it, the Christmas morning he gave me a tangled string of lights to make Grandpa's fairy tale house, and the silly prank he played on his first day of college. Their laughter filled the room, fragile at first, then freer with every shared memory. That night, I knelt between their twin beds, tucking each in. Emma looked up with sleepy eyes. "Grandpa Jack, am I really staying with you?" "Forever and always," I whispered, brushing her cheek. James offered a small smile. "Will you read us a bedtime story?" "As many as you'd like," I promised. Falling asleep later in the quiet apartment, I felt Carlton's presence in every shadow and whisper. He had saved us from an uncertain fate, not with grand gestures, but with his careful foresight and unwavering love. I closed my eyes, listening to the soft breaths of my grandchildren, and knew that although our journey was just beginning, we would face it together, bound by memory, protected by his final gift. Part 4, A New Beginning. The next morning, sunlight filtered through thin curtains into our tiny living room, now transformed into a makeshift breakfast nook. I was at the stove, flipping pancakes with too much vanilla and a sprinkle of cinnamon, the smell exactly as Carlton used to make. Emma perched on a stool, her legs swinging, while James leaned against the counter, half asleep but eyeing the plate with eager hunger. "Grandpa Jack," Emma said, blue eyes bright, "are these Dad's pancakes?" I nodded, sliding a hot one onto her plate. "Just like he did, with extra vanilla." James cracked a sleepy smile. "These might be better than school cafeteria food." Their laughter filled the apartment, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel hollowed out by grief or haunted by Cleo's harsh words. I felt full, of purpose, of love, and of a quiet determination to build something lasting for these two children. After breakfast, we bundled up and headed out to sign the lease on our new home, a 3-bedroom bungalow with a small backyard where we could plant flowers and play catch. The kids ran ahead, inspecting the yard's uneven patches of grass, already mapping out bases for future baseball games. As I signed my name on the dotted line, I realized this house was more than a property, it was the space where their childhood would flourish, and where Carlton's legacy would live on. That afternoon, we visited their father's grave. Emma carried a small bouquet of daisies she'd picked from the yard, and James held the framed photo Grandpa Jack and Daddy had taken at the lake. Standing before the polished headstone, I knelt beside them. "Daddy built this for us," I said, my voice steady. "He made sure we'd be safe, that we'd have each other." Emma gently laid her flowers at the base. "He's proud of us, right?" I pressed her hand. "More than you'll ever know." James touched the frame. "I miss him, but I feel okay too." I wrapped my arms around them both. "He's here with us, every step of the way." Over the following weeks, our life settled into a comforting routine. Mornings began with pancakes and homework sprawled across the kitchen table. Afternoons were filled with park visits, art projects, and story time, moments that once felt impossible in Cleo's perfectly sterile house. Nights were for laughter and tears in equal measure, as we shared memories of Carlton, his terrible dad jokes, his fierce love of Sunday barbecues, the way he always let Emma stay up late when she begged. Cleo's supervised visits became part of our schedule. The first time she arrived at our front door, gift bag in hand, uncertainty in her eyes, I felt a flicker of the old anger. But I reminded myself she was part of their story too. We greeted her on the porch. The children, now confident in their home, came forward without hesitation. "Hi, Mom," Emma said, holding out a drawing she'd made. "Thank you, sweetie," Cleo whispered, taking it with trembling fingers. James offered his hand, and she took it. We spent the afternoon at a nearby ice cream parlor, one of Carlton's favorites, watching as Emma and James shared a sundae, giggling over sprinkles and hot fudge. Cleo looked on, a tentative smile breaking through. I sipped my coffee, feeling both protective and relieved. The journey to this moment had been hard, but perhaps she was learning too. On weekends, I arranged simple outings, hiking trails where we could collect fallen leaves, science museums where we chased robotic exhibits, and quiet afternoons building blanket forts in the living room. Each memory we created wove another thread in our newly formed tapestry of healing. One evening, as I tucked the kids into bed, Emma sighed contentedly. "Grandpa Jack, do you think Dad would like our new house?" "I think he'd love it," I replied, brushing her hair. "He picked you to take care of these moments." James yawned. "I love you, Grandpa Jack." "I love you both," I whispered, kissing their foreheads. After the door clicked shut, I stood in the hallway, listening to their even breaths. I walked to the window overlooking our backyard, the place where flowers would bloom next spring, where laughter would echo through open windows, where life would go on. I reached into my pocket and pulled out Carlton's letter, reading his final words once more. "You are not a burden, Dad. You are the heart of this family." I closed my eyes and let a single tear fall, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. Carlton's last gift had done more than secure our future. It had reminded me that love, even after death, can build a foundation strong enough to raise new life and heal old wounds. And so, as the stars emerged above our little bungalow, I whispered into the night, "We're home, Carlton. We're finally home." Part 5, Seeds of Tomorrow. A year had passed since I first took Emma and James home, an entire cycle of seasons woven into our new life. Spring arrived with daffodils nodding in the yard where we'd planted seeds together. Emma, now 10, insisted they be Daddy's flowers, and each dawn she tiptoed outside to whisper good morning to their yellow faces. James, 11, spent afternoons practicing his pitching under the old maple tree, the crack of baseball against mitt echoing like laughter through our porch. That March, on the anniversary of Carlton's passing, we gathered at his graveside. Cleo stood beside me, her posture straighter than I'd ever seen, no designer clothes this time, just simple jeans and a navy coat. Emma handed me a small bouquet of daisies and tulips. James held the framed photo from our first morning of pancakes. As I read a short note Carlton had written for this day, I felt his presence in the breeze that stirred the grass around us. Cleo's tears glistened in the sunlight, but they were kinder now, tears of remembrance, not erasure. Back at home, life kept its steady rhythm. Weekdays were for school routines, lunchboxes lined up on the counter, backpacks draped over chairs, math flashcards scattered across the table. Evenings meant violin practice for Emma and robotics club for James, with dinner conversations that ran the gamut from algebra woes to inventions they dreamed of building. I found myself marveling at their resilience, the way they'd reclaimed childhood, turning our modest bungalow into a hub of inventiveness and joy. Cleo's visits became less tentative, more collaborative. She and I co-hosted weekend art sessions in the living room, clearing the coffee table to spread out canvases and paints. One Saturday, Emma painted a portrait of Carlton in his Sunday cardigan. Across the page, she sketched Cleo and me smiling beside her. "Because you're our family now," she explained. My chest ached with pride and relief that even she, once so distant, had begun to find her place. June brought the biggest milestone yet, James's first Little League game. From the bleachers, I cheered along with Cleo, our voices merging in a single, hopeful chant. When he struck out the final batter and raised his glove in triumph, the crowd roared, and I thought I saw Carlton's grin reflected in the scorekeeper's window. Afterward, Cleo hugged him tighter than any coach could, and I felt certain that she'd learned what he always knew: love isn't neat or effortless, but it's the only foundation worth building on. That summer, we painted the backyard fence together, bright green for new growth, white picket roses winding up the posts. Emma and James climbed the ladder, hand over hand, while Cleo and I steadied the boards below. When at last we stepped back to admire our work, James declared it perfect, and I realized that perfection wasn't a sterile showroom. It was this: messy paint drips, laughter echoing off boards, 3 generations holding brushes in the golden light. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood with Carlton's letter in my pocket, his final gift still guiding every step. I watched Emma chase fireflies and James toss a stray ball, and I whispered into the evening air, "We're living what you dreamed, son. Thank you." And in that moment, I knew the seeds he planted in his last months had blossomed into something stronger than I ever dared imagine, a family rooted in love and tending together toward tomorrow. Part 6, Full Circle. 3 years have slipped by since I first stood on that stoop with court orders in hand, 3 years of pancakes and ball games, of science fairs and violin recitals. Now, as I sit on the front porch of our little bungalow, the same creaking boards warm beneath my feet, I watch Emma and James move through their evenings with the confident ease of children who know they're loved. Emma, now 13, darts out the front door with a paint-streaked apron, bound for the community art center where she volunteers after school. She pauses to plant a kiss on my cheek. "Thanks for driving me, Grandpa Jack," she says, slipping past me into the sunset. I smile and tip my hat, her shorthand for "You're welcome." James, 14 and already dreaming of college baseball, emerges carrying his glove and bat. He drops into the rocking chair beside me. "Nice evening for practice," he observes, skimming his fingers over one of the daisies Carlton's garden still blooms each spring. "Perfect evening," I agree. I reach into my pocket for the folded letter Carlton wrote me the night before he passed. I unfold it, tracing the familiar scrawl. "You are the heart of this family." I close my eyes and let the words settle. Across the street, Cleo's car pulls up. She steps out, carrying 2 steaming cups of tea, my favorite hibiscus blend. Her visits are no longer tense exchanges but warm conversations, gardening tips, school events, shared pride in how our family has grown. She sets a cup beside me. Emma and James join us around the porch table, their laughter rising as we recount a story from Emma's art class, about the time she painted lilies so lifelike a neighbor tried to water them. James pumps his glove in excitement, recalling his latest strikeout in Little League. Cleo leans forward, eyes shining with genuine admiration. When the sun finally dips below the rooftops, I fold Carlton's letter one last time and tuck it back into my jacket. "Ready for supper?" I ask. The kids nod, and even Cleo smiles. We gather our things and step inside together. That night, as the chandelier casts its warm glow over our dinner table, scattered with lasagna, garlic bread, and Emma's fresh-baked cookies, I look around at these faces, my grandchildren, their mother, and me. I see the trust in Emma's eyes, the confidence in James's posture, the humility in Cleo's expression. I realize Carlton's final gift wasn't just the money or the legal papers. It was the blueprint for love that endures beyond tragedy, the lesson that family can be reforged stronger than before. His legacy lives on in every shared meal, every scraped knee I tend, every bedtime story I read. As we pass plates and share our day's triumphs and stumbles, I raise my glass of iced tea. To Carlton, I say softly, who showed us that even after loss, love finds a way. The clink of glasses echoes around the room, and I know in my bones that this, laughter mixing with tears, imperfect moments woven into lasting bonds, is exactly what he wanted for us all.